Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I am Chuck Todd, reporting here in Washington, where the writing is already on the wall for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. There is no sugarcoating this. His emerging presidential candidacy is struggling, bigly, as someone might say, despite huddling with Republicans in Washington and a behind-the-scenes operation to try to cement and rally home state support. It is Donald Trump who continues to pick up endorsements from Florida Republicans. Today, you can add Congressman Michael Waltz, who represents DeSantis' old congressional seat in Jacksonville. He officially endorsed Trump, touting the former president's record on the economy and national security.
We have a great governor. We have an abundance of leadership in Florida. But my focus here in Washington is keeping the country safe. And we need bold leadership. We need experienced leadership.
Like 10 congressional Republicans from Florida are now backing Trump and not DeSantis. I mean, DeSantis is kind of out of the picture in Florida right now.
Well, they're both delivering for Florida, Stu. I mean, look, this is a difficult situation that we're in. However, President Trump's from Florida. He delivered for Florida. And again, on the international stage, that deterrence is what we need.
He's not from Florida, but he's become a resident recently, so I guess he is now a Floridian as far as Congressman Waltz is concerned. The contest for Florida House Republicans has so far not been a contest. Trump has secured endorsements from 11 of the state's 20 congressional Republicans. DeSantis has secured 1. His lack of support on Capitol Hill, by the way, he's a former member of Congress himself, may spell trouble for his support back home as well, down the ballot. According to Politico, Florida state legislators are deeply frustrated and are feeling a bit worn out by the governor, particularly over his seemingly personal feud with Disney. One GOP legislator privately told Politico, "We're not the party of cancel culture. We can't keep doing this tit for tat." Despite the challenges, DeSantis is carrying on with what appears to be a prelude to a presidential campaign. He is boasting about what he calls a Florida blueprint last night in the early voting state of South Carolina.
Conservative policies are what the average person wants to see, not just in Florida and South Carolina, but I think all across these United States.
Folks, let's state the obvious. It is early in this 2024 campaign. At least the calendar says it's early. The first debate is 4 months from now, and the first nominating contest is 9 months from now. That said, 5 months ago, Ron DeSantis was quickly becoming at least the co-Republican frontrunner for 2024. He was fresh off a nearly 20-point landslide victory in his reelection bid. And Republicans nationwide were panicking about multiple midterm setbacks because of Trump's unpopularity and antics. And they see this dark red wave in Florida, and they think, wow, what about that guy? But here we are today, 6 months later. DeSantis is not even the frontrunner in his home state. He's been trumped, literally and figuratively, by the man who helped him rise to prominence, and that may be the issue here, is that DeSantis is Trump. And if you either want Trump or a clone of Trump, you'll take the original. The question now, has the sun set on DeSantis' White House hopes for now? Will Trump's road to the Republican nomination in 2024 turn into a contest or coronation? Joining me now is NBC's own resident Florida man, senior national politics reporter Matt Dixon. And we're going to also bring in a couple of other folks who are veterans of presidential races. But, Matt, I want to start with what's going on in Florida. And let's start with the congressional side first. Ron DeSantis went out of his way to make sure there was an even more favorable Republican map for members of Congress. He created 2 new Republican districts when even the Florida Republican legislature said, oh, no, this is about the best we can max out. And this is how grateful the Republican House members are to him?
Yeah, he actually vetoed the congressional maps drawn by the very Republican-dominated legislature and sort of drew his own, and those are under legal challenge yet. But, yeah, I mean, the Republican majority in the House, because it was slimmer than a lot of people expected coming out of the midterms, has a lot to do with Florida's maps. And I think there's, been a lot of reporting on it, but the charm offensive isn't exactly Governor DeSantis' strong suit. He had, a staffer calling around to members of his home state congressional delegation asking them to, not endorse, kind of pump the brakes a bit. And Trump was making those calls himself. And, a few of the members that I've spoken to say things like that matter.
And that's what this looks like. I mean, the Greg Steube, the congressman who fell off his roof while he was trimming trees, ended up in the hospital, very serious.
Sure.
And to find out Donald Trump called and Ron DeSantis didn't. I mean, that's politics 101. Honestly, that's any company you work with and the leader finds out somebody on his team is in the hospital, they usually call. I mean, it is an odd disconnect here with the governor.
Yeah, without question, but that's kind of who he is, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. He's not good in those moments. His rise in politics and who he has become nationally is because he's sort of a hammer. Blunt force sort of defines his style, and you know, personal politics, professionally, however you want to frame it. And I think we're seeing prime examples of that. I think his team's probably trying to work on it, but I think there's there's limits to what you can do when the principle sort of wired a certain way.
Let's talk about the Tallahassee Republican issue. When they say they're exhausted, I read between the lines of this is not a bunch of Republicans who are interested in having a fight with Disney for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I don't want to date myself, but I've covered about 13 legislative sessions, and I've never seen Republicans have to hold their nose and take votes they don't want to take here so much. The governor sort of has the legislature, doing whatever he wants, and there's certainly some exhaustion. None of them will really put their names on it. I was speaking with a member of the state executive committee for the Republican Party of Florida just earlier today, and they sort of framed it as, Trump is fighting Democrats and DeSantis is fighting a mouse, and members of Congress and voters are, siding with the person they think is waging the more important fight. And I think that's emblematic. There's certainly support for the governor here. There are members who really, really do like him and support him, but there's a lot of people who are tired.
Let me ask you this, Matt. Is the DeSantis team, are they self-aware here or not?
I think there are some. It's a nuanced. It's an interesting question. I definitely think the core inner circle has still has institutional confidence. Some would call arrogance, but I do think there is a growing chorus among some of the governor's supporters. Maybe those who aren't necessarily always in the room, that the key advisors, but folks who are helping. That they need a bit of a course correction. I have talked to many who don't think that's coming. They think sort of this Governor DeSantis is going to win or lose based on the culture war-based trajectory that he's been on so far, and no one's really expecting him to sort of step back and maybe change his perspective. I don't think anyone foresees that coming at the moment. And
there's no thought that he's getting cold feet, is there?
No, I still very much think he runs, and when he does run, I think he'll probably get a little bump, might level out a bit, and I think at that moment when if he can maintain that momentum after that will be interesting. But I don't personally think that he's getting cold feet. I think he's going to run.
Matt Dixon, our own Florida man who covers national politics for us, but based in the great state of Florida. Matt, thank you. So joining me now is a couple of people who know a little bit about running against Donald Trump or running with Donald Trump, depending on your point of view. I've got former Ohio governor and NBC News political analyst John Kasich, and coming up in a second will be former congressman from South Florida, Francis Rooney. But Governor Kasich, let me start with you. You've been in politics a long time, my friend, and I'm curious what you make of watching DeSantis. Is this a case of when you try to be, hey, I'm just like him, but I'm the light version, right? Is this a case of I got a choice between Bud and Bud Light? I guess those are the wrong beer I should be focusing on these days with the Republicans. But if I'm going to take Bud or Bud Light, I'm going to take the original, right? I'm going to take Bud.
I think that's true, Chuck.
And is that what's happening here?
Yeah. I think that's a big chunk of it. I think, there's a couple things. First of all, he's not in the race, right? I mean, he's got 1 foot in the race and 1 foot out of the race. And so it's not surprising that there's a number of members down there that say, well, you're not even in. So, and I got Trump over here and he's going to hammer me. And, that's part of it. The other part of it is what you say. You can't be Trump light. I mean, if you're going to be, some sort of something that's kind of like it, but not quite it, people will go for the real thing, and it's like Coke. You're going to go with Coke, not Coke Light. And I think that's part of it. The other part of it is he's a front runner. And I kind of like the idea of being a front runner, Chuck, but what happens to front runners? They get hammered and
who's the front runner?
And everything
else. I'm confused, John. Is it Trump or DeSantis? I get your point, but Trump's the front runner.
You got my point. My point is, as opposed to Trump, who's the front runner that's viewed as somebody that could take Trump down. And so, and then, I just think he's, the other problem I think that he has is that he doesn't have that great personality. Now, I'm told, I was talking to somebody today.
Do you know him? Have you had?
I've only met him one time. He's
never called you up? I mean, I'm always curious, there's always, like, if you're thinking about doing something you've never done before, a lot of times, I know what I do, I call up people who've done it. Tell me what that's like, right? Have you gotten that call from him?
No. I saw him one time, and it was brief, and it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is that if you sit in Congress and you don't know anybody, then you go back and you say, "I need you to help me." Sometimes guys and women are not really, kind of fired up to do it. Let me just say a couple things though about that Florida legislature when they say they're exhausted. Exhausted doing what? Go work on a rooftop somewhere and do blue-collar labor for a couple hours and then call me and tell me about being exhausted. They're whining. I mean, I went through that with my legislature. He has a big agenda. Now, they may not like his agenda. And fighting with Disney, to me, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But he has a couple things going for him. He's got money, ability to raise money, at least at this point. And he's putting together a pretty good team. And I understand he's signing somebody up that can help him in Iowa.
Right.
But he's got to focus on those early races. He can't be, thinking I can get to the early races later. Giuliani tried that. Remember that, Chuck?
Yep.
And it went nowhere. It was like a lead balloon. So, it's early. And to be a president, money, okay, ideas, critical, and the third one. Magic.
Yeah.
You've got to have the magic, and we'll have to see if he has it.
But let me ask you about message and messenger, right? I have thought that DeSantis was sort of an idea that hadn't been tested in theory, and we're starting to see it, and we're going to find out. I mean, when I've ever seen him perform as a candidate, I've always been like, whoa. I mean, his debates performances are definitely a little stilted and things like that. But let me talk about the message. Is there a message? I had somebody say to me, what Ron DeSantis needs to figure out is how to give Donald Trump his gold watch. Say, thank you very much. Here's your gold watch. You've been amazing. You've been terrific. And that DeSantis hasn't figured out how to do that. But is that the right message?
I don't think so. I think the message is, and DeSantis actually said this, Chuck, I guess a couple of weeks ago. He said, look, the chaos is not good. I have people in my administration, DeSantis' administration, who really understand what my agenda is. They follow my agenda. These were shots at Trump. Now, the media wants, a heavyweight knockdown. Mm-hmm. Remember, many heavyweight championships fights are won on technical knockouts. What you do round by round by round by round. And, DeSantis, landed a couple blows, I think, right there. But we haven't heard too much since then. But, the idea of talking to Trump about how great he is and all, no, just do your job. Tell him why it's Mike Wallace, right? Why do you, Senator Kennedy, why do you want to be president? DeSantis has to tell people why he wants to be president and what's the creative things he wants to do. This drift into being a social media guy and trying to get the same place where Trump is. Chuck, I don't know about you. I don't think that works. Do you? I mean, I just don't think that's a positive message. Where's the message of hope? Where's the message of getting people to be bigger than they are, to think about how they can change the world? I don't see that message.
This is where I worry that worry's the wrong word. Sometimes I wonder if we're just creatures of a previous world. Donald Trump himself said, the old Republican Party is dead. I destroyed it. I'm the new Republican Party. What you're describing, look, that's the politics I was raised on, which is you gravitated toward the center. You tried to be above politics, even if you were a partisan, in order to win a general election. But that is not what today's politicians believe.
Chuck, the Republican Party has gotten slaughtered. We lost the presidential. We lost all these special elections. We didn't do well in the midterm. I mean, if you're a Republican, you're losing, and you're losing on those issues. There's no issues of hope out there. Hope always works, Chuck. It always works. With a legitimate foundation that tells you how you can get the hope. People are frustrated today with their lives. They're worried about the economy, all that stuff. You're not going to win that by having a fight with Donald Trump on who's going to be the most conservative here on some of these social issues. I think the old message does work, Chuck. You got to upgrade it. It's got to be modern. I mean, you've got to be able to talk about AI and all the things of machine learning and all these things and education and all that. But, you know, to go into this dark world, negative world, I mean, that doesn't work. And let me just tell you one other thing, Chuck. Remember this. I went to New Hampshire in 2016. I lost to Trump. I beat everybody else, and I started with 1%. How did I do it? Being in with crowds, being in there having a positive message. And then, of course, the media followed Trump. It was ridiculous. He got all the publicity. If I had been able to get the money and the attention, I might have done a lot better than what I did. I did all right, though. Positive.
No, look, I don't know if this Republican Party wants a positive message.
And they probably don't.
Right?
And they're going to keep losing until they get one. I mean, how many times do you have to sing the song where the crowd boos you? We're losing Republicans are losing. I'm an American. I happen to be an American before I'm a Republican. And the fact is that the message that's out there now, the medicine that you're trying to give is not a positive, good, hopeful message. I don't think it works.
John Kasich, I'm going to let you go. It's always a pleasure to get your perspective here, particularly as someone who's put themselves out there, been on a ballot, been up against Trump. You have some unique experiences. As always, good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Good to see you, Chuck. Thank you.
All right. And as promised, we had a bit of a technical difficulty, but we got things working. With me now is someone who knows a lot about both Republican politics and Florida politics. It's former Florida Congressman Francis Rooney. Congressman, it's good to see you. I'm glad we worked this out.
Thanks for having me back on, Chuck.
All right. I'm going to make you respond to something you told me 6 months ago and get your assessment of what you said then and whether you still back it up. Let me play the clip for you, sir.
While Trump buried us with these elections, so many people are still currying favor in hiding under Trump's penumbra. And I don't see the value in that. And to keep hearkening back on the past, the world has moved beyond Trump, but there are a certain number of very conservative Republicans who don't seem to have that figured out yet.
Now, you said that in November, right? And it was just after, right, what happened in the midterms. And I thought you were speaking for a growing number of rank-and-file Republicans. That's not what we're seeing right now.
Well, we're seeing a rise in his polling support as a result of things like that indictment. And I think that shows you that there's still a hardcore group of people that are going to do anything for Trump. And we're not going to win. The Democrats have this thing figured out, and we're still Ned the third-grade reader. They want to run against Trump and beat him.
Let me ask you this. Give some advice to Governor DeSantis. What is your take as to why he has been outmaneuvered? I mean, I had one person who say it's all thanks to Susie Wiles, who's a longtime Florida political consultant. Are you really going to tell me that a Florida political consultant has outmaneuvered Ron DeSantis here?
No, I think there's a couple of things Ron could probably do better at, in terms of working his donors and showing a little more warmth to people in the crowd and working the rope lines and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think this is about Trump and his hardcore support. Down where I'm from, those people would do anything for Trump.
I know.
It's messy.
So how do you get beyond that? Because you're right. I mean, look, there are some Democrats who I think believe that, hey, the more attention they pay to him, they basically ice out anybody else. And we know he has a hard ceiling. I think that's a crazy notion to think about that way. If you're truly fearful of him being president, you shouldn't want to get him the nomination. But let's set that aside. How do you break through that if you're a Republican?
Well, that's why I keep calling for more other voices to get in the fray, like Governor Youngkin. It's good that Nikki Haley's in there. And as Governor Kasich said quite astutely, we need some discussion on positive ways to go forward, positive policies, and not just your typical Trump negativity and bringing things down. And maybe that would help broaden the debate a little bit.
Well, I come from a time when I was always told the most optimistic candidate usually wins. That's how you win general elections. So I get where you're coming from. We will see where the party heads. Francis Rooney, apologies for the tech issues, but I'm glad we got a few minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me on.
You got it. Up next, U.S. troops are having to get ready for a potential evacuation of our embassy in Sudan as the country's security situation continues to deteriorate. We have the latest from the Pentagon. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. NBC News has confirmed reports this afternoon that the U.S. military is having to position troops in the East African country of Djibouti in case of a potential need to evacuate Americans in Sudan. Fighting in Sudan continues within the capital city of Khartoum. Despite a proclaimed ceasefire, civilians, including Americans, in Sudan have been caught up in a violent struggle for political control between a paramilitary group associated with the country's vice president and Sudan's official military associated with the president. The latest death count from the WHO stands at over 330. And despite this military movement, the State Department has not yet asked for an evacuation of embassy staff or American citizens. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby told reporters today that the State Department is trying to get staff all in one place.
We have good accountability of all our government personnel there working in and out of the embassy. They are all not still co-located, so the State Department is still, the embassy there is still trying to get them all co-located together for their own safety. They are still sheltering in place where they are.
Courtney Cubie has been reporting on this story all day today. And Courtney, give me a sense of how much infrastructure are we putting in Djibouti in order to prepare for this?
So there's already some infrastructure that's there. So remember after the attack on the consulate in Benghazi more than a decade ago, Chuck, the Marine Corps established what at the time they were calling a special purpose MAGTF, Marine Air Ground Task Force. They've sort of changed the construct a little, but they still have these small, quick reaction force teams that are regional, including one that's called Crisis Response. Now, there are several hundred Marines that are actually already in Djibouti at Camp Lemonnier. It's in East Africa, not too far from Sudan. There's already several hundred of them there. They're essentially an aviation combat unit that would have the ability to respond to something like this. So some of the infrastructure exists already there, but according to U.S. defense officials, the U.S. is still sending in even more, including what will likely include some special operations forces. And part of that is because of just what a contested environment it is right now in Khartoum. You mentioned that there's been days and days of fighting. There's the ceasefire that's clearly not holding right now. If it's a more contested environment, that's when we could see, rather than this Marine Air Ground Task Force or this Marine Aviation Unit going in to potentially evacuate people, we could see special operations forces. And what would be, in addition to just potentially being fired at or fired upon while they're flying in or on the ground, in addition to that, there's also the problem that the airport's not even operable right now, so they would have to find an alternative location to go to.
Right.
It's a difficult logistics environment if in fact they do call for an evacuation.
And the evacuation is just focused on embassy and embassy personnel and any Americans that get there. I mean, there are 19,000 American citizens estimated to be in country. I know a lot of them are dual citizens. What kind of promises will America make? If we're starting to evacuate embassy personnel, we're going to keep going back and getting Americans?
The military is preparing to not only get out the embassy personnel, but if there is a call for a larger evacuation of American citizens, they're preparing for it. They are sending in the infrastructure if they are called to do so.
Okay. So do you sense that the State Department asked the Pentagon, look, we're not asking for it yet, but just be ready? Is that the best way to describe this?
I think the military decided to get ready. They saw the attack on that convoy the other day in Khartoum, and this is very standard, right? They put people in place if they're called upon for something, but they see the situation there, and it doesn't surprise me that they're starting to pre-position people.
All right, Courtney Cubie, an administration that does not need a second type of situation that looks like Afghanistan. Anyway, Courtney, thank you. After the break, lighting up the culture wars at the Capitol as the U.S. House passes its own transgender sports ban in schools. One of the latest in the GOP bill, why it's bound to die in the Senate, and what it says about the road to 2024. Panel's next. Welcome back. House Republicans followed the lead of many state House Republicans and took action today on an issue that has been firing up the conservative base, at least in theory. We don't know if this actually matters at the polls yet, but it's not on the border, it's not on spending or health care, it is on trans athletes. With only Republican votes, the House passed the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, which would amend Title IX to bar schools that receive federal funding from allowing trans athletes from participating in women's sports. For what it's worth, they don't make this designation on men's sports. The bill has no chance of making it through a democratically controlled Senate, of course. And while there are only a very small number of trans athletes competing in sports, it is something that has fired up Republican commentators nationwide. Take a listen to House number 3 in leadership, Elise Stefanik, earlier today.
This is about protecting women's sports now and into the future, and we anticipate this will be passed today, and it is a winning issue across America, standing up for the future of women and girls.
Joining me now on set, Tamara Keith, White House correspondent for NPR, Democratic pollster and NBC News political analyst Cornell Belcher, and Republican strategist Doug Heye. Tamara, I should make the note, again, this is only talking about trans women participating in women's sports. There's nothing on there about trans men participating in male sports, for what it's worth. But it's that last comment by Elise Stefanik. I've talked to many Republicans who believe they keep thinking if they frame this as protecting women's sports, that it's going to get more support. And I don't think that's worked.
So Title IX is about women's sports.
Right.
So that's what's going on here with that. And if you look at polling, the majority of Americans do not want trans athletes, or they want trans athletes playing in the sport according to the gender they were born with.
Right.
However, in terms of like a motivating voting issue, I think the jury is very much out.
And there's no proof yet.
No, there was a Navigator poll around the time of the midterms. Now, this is a Democratic-ish polling firm, so take it with a grain of salt. But they talked to 5,000 voters, and among Republican voters, only about 20% said it was a motivating issue for them. People care a lot more about the economy and certainly the abortion issue.
We should make note, there is some Title IX recommendations that the Biden administration did amend to deal with trans athletes. And Cornell, one of the things that essentially they gave the power to, they said, look, if they're banned from competition, that's okay. Like, it was one of those, they shouldn't be banned from being on the team, but it's sort of up to the universities, it's up to in competition. So in many ways, Biden was certainly, yes, we agree.
I've heard this conversation about how we should leave it up to, the states or the localities before coming from Republicans. So I think it's really interesting that they decided they do a national ban. Last time I checked, Chuck, and I actually did check before coming here, I can't find transgender issues as a top 10 issue concern anywhere in this country. So you have a Republican Congress who ran largely on, we got to fix the economy, we got to fix the economy, we got to fix the economy. Oh, and by the way, crime is out of control. It's really interesting that they've wasted this much time moving something that impacts maybe 10 people across this country when they ran on taking care of our issues with crime and making the economy better. And I've yet to see any major legislation that they've passed around the issues that are, quite frankly, most important to American people.
Doug Heye, I think for the average voter that maybe, sort of glances at political headlines, maybe once a week sits down, watches a Sunday show, hopefully Meet the Press. The one thing they might heard from the Republicans has to do with Bud Light and trans athletes. They're not talking about, to Cornell's point, isn't this a potential problem?
That they're not focusing on the issues that everybody else tends to focus on is a problem. And I think we can see this in some of the demographics of what we've seen. Women's sports have gone through a light change of leaps and bounds in the prominence in American sports, and we just saw that with the Final Four. Yeah.
Arguably, the women's Final Four got a lot more attention and interest than the men's Final Four.
It was a better game.
It was a better game. It was more interesting.
On a better night.
Without question. And while I think that they can correctly argue about protecting women's sports, Republicans, especially conservative Republican primary voters, I'm going to step off on a limb here and say probably don't actually watch a lot of women's sports. So it's not really the targeted demographic isn't the one that follows that argument most closely.
It's one of those things, arguably, there was a lot of people concerned in 2021 that Democratic consultants were living in a bubble on some of these culture issues.
Was it a major concern? Because I could tell you it's true.
Yeah. But our Republican consultants in a bubble.
Everyone lives in a bubble. It's just that your bubble is different from my bubble, my bubble is different from your bubble, and we despise and loathe other people's bubbles. We love ours because we think ours isn't.
Yeah. Well, Washington's a very special bubble.
It is. Tamara, I want to shift to abortion here a little bit. It was very interesting. According to the Washington Post, the chair of the RNC, Ronald McDaniel, has privately been circulating polling to candidates showing the American public broadly supports a 15-week ban. And she has privately expressed concerns about a 6-week ban. More hand-wringing over what to do about abortion with the leadership of the Republican Party.
You might say that this is a Republicans in disarray moment, where Republicans have this very big issue that when it was abstract and it was an academic debate and it wasn't about anyone's rights really because Roe was in place, then they were pretty unified. But now that Roe is gone and they're in the position of making policy and needing to take a position on very specific things, there's not actual agreement among Republicans on what their position should be. And there is very real concern that taking too extreme a position, though many candidates and state leaders are moving directly towards that more extreme position, that extreme position is going to cause them major problems in the election.
Cornell, the irony is that what got the Dobbs decision was a law in Mississippi that was trying to be 15 weeks. Right? Like, and that's what John Roberts was begging. I mean, you tell me, would there be as much usefulness of the abortion issue to rally Democratic candidates if the rest of the Republican Party said, yeah, 15 weeks, and 15 weeks were the law, and there would be Democratic activists going, no, that's too little. Would it have the same impact?
That's a really good question. But as you know, if you're arguing process and politics, Chuck, you're losing. Right? I think this is an issue that, and by the way, it's not an issue that's going away. Again, going to the next election, this will be a top two issue. And it'll be an issue that absolutely...
And if you do split it by gender, it'll probably be the #1 issue for women.
For women, exactly. We talked about that. And if you look at the gender gap that continues to grow, especially in the suburbs and battleground states, this is a problem for Republicans because I don't know how you get Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, these suburbs back with this issue hanging over you.
It goes back to, Doug, think about your old days at the RNC. The goal back then used to be, what's your addition? What are you adding to your pool of voters? Where are Republicans adding right now?
They're not on this, and part of that is the RNC wants to make a national effort because you have 50 states that are going to do 50 things, and it's sort of a name that tune. You're banning that abortion in 7 weeks? Well, I can ban that abortion in 6 weeks. And nobody gets that, more ironically, than Donald Trump. He is more single-handedly responsible because of 3 Supreme Court justices, and he's not saying a word. Trump gets it, which is not something I say very often.
All right, let's move to Florida and Ron DeSantis. It's early, all the caveats, but boy, this feels, Tamara, like the sequel to the movie Failure to Launch.
Or the Jeb Bush, the movie, ! Yeah.
In fact, I was going to say that to John Kasich. He kept bringing up, he goes, Ron DeSantis really did he had a good message saying, Trump's filled with chaos. And I'm like, the first person who made the chaos argument? Jeb Bush.
Jeb Bush. So what the former president has been able to do is line up, and let's just say endorsements may not matter as much as they used to, but the former president has been able to consolidate Republicans in Florida. At this point, he's got about half of the congressional delegation in Florida.
He is a Florida
locked up.
carpetbagger. Now, we don't care. In Florida, we're built on carpetbaggers, so we don't care. But he's been a Floridian for about 10 minutes.
Right. He disclaimed his New York citizenship at some point. But he has locked those people down, and that is an indication potentially of something larger. That and, Trump is back on Fox and DeSantis has somehow is not as shiny as he was a couple months ago.
Let me ask the both of you. Is this a story about DeSantis or a story about Trump?
Both.
Yeah.
Trump's team has handled this
very...
Both
not an option.
Well, but Trump's team has definitely handled this in their timing on these endorsements. And meanwhile...
Susie Wiles.
Absolutely.
I do think she gets a bunch of credit. I mean, I had somebody talk to me. She's just iced him. And it's like, welcome to being, DeSantis thought he could bully everybody in the state. No, you can't.
And meanwhile, what is a topic on every TV channel today and yesterday? Gas stations in the Miami area. Where's the governor? Not in the state, not at those gas stations saying, I'm going to solve this problem. And it's not a cultural problem. No. It's something that affects every Floridian.
Politics 101, campaign politics 101. You've got to at some point disqualify the person in front of you. You just do. I think they really did make a strategic error because his whole sort of predicate was, well, I'm Trump-ish, but if Trump fails, I'm the fallback. Well, you got to disqualify him. And I thought the legal problems were a perfect way for him to start disqualifying, and he took up the Trump message on the legal argument and made it about partisanship.
Very quickly, at this point in time in 2007, people were hand-wringing about Obama. Oh, he's not taking it to Hillary. Is it a similar comparison or not?
All the polls at this point do not matter, but you can see a pathway for Obama. Change, different, anti-Washington. I have a hard time seeing a pathway for him, as Trump liked.
Anti-Washington would have been an interesting place for him to go, especially since Washington is rejecting Ron DeSantis. Tamara Cornell and Mr. Hyde, who came with a Reggie bar. A Reggie bar. How's that for your 420 celebration? After the break, high anxiety for Senate Democrats. I'm heading to the big board to break down the 2024 Senate state of play and the key races to watch with the one and only Steve Kornacki, who's doing a state visit to the Bureau. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Beat the Press Now. Welcome back. I'm here at the big board because I have a special guest who's visiting the D.C. Bureau today. It's an early look at the 2024 Senate map. We may be more than 500 days from Election Day, but there are some inferences we can already make from even this far out. Here's the map as it stands right now. This is Senate map, and as we've been saying for a while, Democrats have a lot of ground to defend, and they don't have many places to go on offense. From incumbents in states Trump won, like Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia, to the perennial swing states these days of Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. All of those have key Senate races. But unlike the Senate races in 2022, this map isn't happening in a vacuum. Next November's presidential race could have a huge impact on every one of these races. Why is that? Check this out. In 2020, only one state had a Senate contest that went a different way than the presidential race. That was our friend Susan Collins right here in Maine. The only one. Not a single state did that in 2016, and only one in 2020. Let me bring in our special guest, Steve Kornacki. When we're both working the board, what are we going to do here? So, look, here was the 2020 map. Let's bring back, and just a reminder, just one.
Yep.
Look, everything was narrow, but everything went the same direction.
Yep.
What was one that was, was Michigan maybe was the one that sort of surprised people? The Senate race got almost as close as the presidential.
Yeah, but what that really gets to is that thing we always talk about. Split ticket voting has just been in decline, and you're down to a point now. Frankly, it was a surprise that even one state in 2020, that was an upset win for Susan Collins.
And it's simply because that second congressional district did vote for Trump.
Right.
So in some ways, that was the saving grace for her. Let's bring up the 2024 map here a minute, just to remind people where the Senate races are. And the 2024 Senate map, it's got all the battleground states. We got Wisconsin, we got Michigan, you got Pennsylvania. I'd throw in Minnesota, right? Yep. You've got Nevada and Arizona. So here you have your battleground states. And then there's the other three that probably make it so that the Democrats are more likely to lose control of the Senate than add seats.
And that's the thing, based on what you're just saying there, when Joe Biden could get reelected in 2024. Right. Say it's Biden versus Trump, and Biden gets reelected.
He can carry all this. He'll carry Michigan.
And right, he could carry.
And those Senate races go. Right.
But is Biden carrying West Virginia over Trump? He lost it by 42 points. Is he carrying Montana over Trump? That's a 20-plus point state. Is he carrying Ohio over Trump? That we now generally regard as a pretty safe Republican state in presidential elections. So all he's got to do is carry those, and unless there's an upset, or really, the Democrats need two,
right? Isn't it just like Democrats have to win two of those three?
Two of the three.
Republicans probably only need one. And there's really only two places, even remotely, you could make an argument that they could target and win, and that'd be Texas and Florida.
Yeah. The crazy thing, too, is, split ticket voting has been in decline for a long time, so this trend is a long time coming. But if you look at this same set of Senate races, can you believe it wasn't that long ago, 2012, Barack Obama got reelected. Heidi Heitkamp won in North Dakota. Joe Donnelly, Missouri. Claire McCaskill got reelected in Missouri. That was only 12 years ago.
I think we had it here. 6 states in 2012.
Yeah.
6 of them. Nevada. Yeah, you had a Republican, Obama carried, and a Republican was able to win the Nevada Senate seat. So you had 6 different races ended up split ticketing. We've had 1 in the last 2 presidential cycles. And if there is not more than 1 for the Democrats, it is likely, you and I were discussing, Joe Biden, if he wins re-election, is more likely to get the House in his party's hands and lose the Senate.
Because, again, it would require to keep if Biden is reelected, he's got to either get his candidate to win a state that he's going to lose by about 40, West Virginia, or a state he's probably going to lose by 20-plus, Montana. There's House districts that are a lot more competitive than that they could win.
And then let's flip the script here. If Donald Trump or the Republican wins the presidency, we're assuming already it's Biden v. Trump. We can discuss that later. But if the Republicans win the presidency, they're probably going to win at least some of these swing state Senate races. It means the Republicans the Republican president is likely to have both the House and Senate.
Yeah, the odds of there being complete control for one party post-2024, much better that if that is the case, and it may not be the case at all, but that if it is the case, the odds are it would be the Republicans. Because a Republican candidate winning nationally, we're going through the Senate here, they already have the House. For the Democrats to win nationally, okay, maybe you can make an argument on the House. You're really starting to stretch it when you get to the Senate.
Now, we did have one development in Montana this week. This idea, Republicans, John Tester has won Montana. He's won his Senate seat. Last time he got narrowly over 50. Okay, it was the first time he'd ever done it. He did not get over 50 in 2006, and he did not get over 50 in 2012. The meaning of him not having to get to 50.
Yeah, again, and that was a 3-point race in 2018 is what it came down to. So, yeah, if you can lower the threshold a bit for him, I think it gives him a bit of a fighting chance. But the other one is, you think of Manchin in West Virginia.
Do you think Manchin runs? Manchin may be on a ballot in West Virginia and a lot of other states.
Jim Justice, the Republican governor, is he going to run? Is he getting a clear path? Does it look like he's going to be the candidate? Because I think
won't get a clear path.
Not a clear path, but does it look like he's going to overwhelm the Republican field there? And if so, boy, that makes it tough for Manchin.
I will say this: Jim Justice will be as easy to win a vote over for Democrats as Joe Manchin is.
Yeah, I think
discuss. Anyway, Steve, good to see you.
You too.
Thanks for visiting. Still to come, a blunt assessment. How would the U.S. respond if China invaded Taiwan? House China committee members held war games this week to answer that very question. Amid rising tensions between Washington and Beijing, one of the lawmakers on the China committee who participated in that war game this week joins me next with more. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The year is 2027, and the U.S. is deciding how to respond to China's invasion of Taiwan. That was the fictional scenario that 24 U.S. lawmakers were simulating last night on Capitol Hill. This war game was led by China Select Committee Chairman Mike Gallagher, and it was run by the D.C.-based think tank Center for a New American Security. For roughly 2 hours, lawmakers acted as National Security Council advisors, deciding the best military, diplomatic, and economic actions to take against Beijing, with the security of the Asia-Pacific hanging in the balance. Last year, we here at Meet the Press did an episode of Meet the Press Reports, and we conducted a similar tabletop exercise, also with CNAS, and also with Congressman Gallagher. Take a listen to what was our biggest takeaway from that exercise. My biggest takeaway, and I want to save this last question for the two of you because you're the elected officials. You're going to have to try to do this. We need an Asian NATO. It is pretty clear we need one.
I think we have an urgent need for more basing agreements in the region, and that became very apparent throughout the war game. We had 3 treaty allies that were involved in the conflict, but we still struggled to project power where we needed to project it.
And again, that was Mike Gallagher participating in the war game we did. You can catch that version of the China war game on NBCNews.com right now, NBCNews.com/MTP Reports, or you can see it on demand on Peacock. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman from California, Khanna. He's also a member of this China Select Committee, and he participated in this war game yesterday. And so, Congressman, that's what I took away, and we did a shrunken version of it. You guys spent time also on the economic sanction front, the sort of the pre-game, if you will, before exchanging military fire. You tell me, what did you learn? What didn't you know going in that you're glad you know now?
Chuck, first, the overall lesson is that a war with China would be devastating and catastrophic for humanity and the United States. So anything we can do.
There's no winner. We never had a winner. There's no winner in this.
There is no winner, and it means thousands of loss of life and economic catastrophe. Here's what surprised me. Under this scenario, there was an assumed no communication between the United States and Beijing in our military political leadership. Now, our committee had met with Bob Iger and Tim Cook about a week ago, and Bob Iger's been to China 45 times. My impression was Bob Iger understands China more than probably many people in our military. Our business relationship probably has more channels of communication, and we need to figure out how we keep the lines of communication open at the same time for our military. And that was really eye-opening to me that we had no communication.
Why was that assumption made? Obviously, this has been an issue right now. I mean, China continues to block a rescheduling of Secretary Blinken's trip to the nation?
Well, we don't have the same formalized agreement that we did with the Soviet Union, where we had military-to-military communication, where we had methods established where secretaries of state could communicate. And right now, I think Secretary Blinken has done a very good job of trying to figure out how we are tough and make sure we're rebalancing the economic relationship with China, making it clear that they cannot invade in any way Taiwan, but also having communication. And that needs to be formalized. We need to do a lot more to formalize that.
Let me ask about the economic aspect to this, the sanctions. Mike Gallagher told reporters today that you played out those economic and financial moves and the counter moves. Describe to me what that looked like, and why do you think it didn't work in this exercise?
Well, it didn't work because to the extent that Xi Jinping is going to be motivated to invade Taiwan, it's out of a cultural reunification. It is out of a sense of having China restore to their nation that they see before the humiliation. And they're factoring in all of the economic consequences. They're factoring in that we control the Strait of Hormuz and can block some of their oil supply. And they're factoring in that they may be able to get that from Russia. And so if they actually take that step, it becomes very hard to deter them. And that's why the deterrence and the prevention has to be beforehand. I actually think that the strategic ambiguity has served the country quite well in deterring it. And when I was in Taiwan, I led a bipartisan delegation. We heard the same from the DPP. Yes, help us get arms and have defense, but continue to have engagement. We've lived with the Chinese up and down for the last 40 years. We want to be secure, but we also want to continue the business relationship.
I'm curious what you thought of the exercise, and is it something, when I had Mikey Sherrill and Mike Gallagher participating in this one, what we did, they both said, boy, more members of Congress ought to do this. Congress ought to do this more often. It was not something that was a regular thing. What did you make of it, and is it something you'd like to see more of?
I thought it was constructive. I thought it was done well. One of the things I want to just praise Chair Gallagher is he's really tried to take the politics out of this. There's not the grandstanding speeches. And I think it's helpful. I do think one thing that would be helpful, though, is to figure out what would prevent war in the first place. I mean, we started with China is invading. And I guess the questions I would want, to your point about an Asian NATO, is if we did move X or move Y, would that deter China? And to game out what are effective deterrence strategies for China.
Do you think we should be putting together a Pacific alliance that looks like NATO?
I think we need to be increasing our defense and arms sales to Taiwan, and we need to make sure we have long-range missile capacity in places and allies where Japan, Philippines, India. I don't know if we need to have a formal structure of NATO, but we definitely need to strengthen the alliances and have the military capability, both naval to make sure there's no blockade and to make sure that there's no amphibious landing.
I want a quick political question for you. Any regrets about going public with your call for Senator Feinstein to resign? Were you the right person to be the one to call for it in California?
I don't know if I was the right person, but I said what is the truth, which is that the senator has just not been able to fulfill her duty. 75% missed votes. Today, the Judiciary Committee nominated or passed 7 candidates, but they didn't pass 5 of them because Senator Feinstein is not there. And in private, a lot of people have said, yeah, Ro, thanks for speaking out. Now, I know, look, I'm co-chairing Barbara Lee's campaign. Right. I said that Gavin Newsom should appoint someone else. I mean, so don't appoint one of the candidates running. So I don't think that creates a conflict. If I was out there saying, go appoint Barbara Lee, it would be different.
I'm curious, you still comfortable with President Biden seeking re-election?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They've named me as one of the 20 people to be a surrogate for him. I'm hoping to be out there making the case.
Have you been asked to be a formal part of the campaign? You just said that. Is that something they're lining up right now?
There was a report in the Washington Post. I learned about it, reading about it in the papers, that I was named to one of these as 20 of his surrogates to be.
Well, you clearly have said yes, right?
And I've said yes. And I think everyone, well, look, he's been a successful president. And Chuck, here's the view. And you know, I've been traveling around the country. I still think he's our best bet in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin to win those states.
All right. I'm up against it. We'd have plenty more to talk about. Good to see you, Congressman. Appreciate you taking some time and telling us about this war game. Thank you all for being with us this hour. We'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. NBC News Now coverage keeps rolling along with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.